a creepy tale for you today, and one that involves some witchcraft and dark, haunting tales of the paranormal. But whether you believe in that stuff or not, behind the tales and folklore is always the true story of one of Malaysia's most horrific and terrifying murders. This is the murder of Mazlan Idris and probably some others. Mazlan Idris was a state assemblyman for the constituency of Batatalam in the state of Pahang, Malay. He had gotten his education in the U.S. He had joined the United Malays National Organization, or the UMNO party, and was serving as a state assemblyman, but had ambitions to become what is known as the Mentiri Bazaar. Now, in Malaysia, they have this constitutional monarchy, which is lorded over by the Sultan, who is currently Abdullah since 2019. Now, he's part of the Bendahara dynasty that's been ruling Malaysia since the 17th century. No female has ever become ruler. The female line descendants are generally excluded from succession. Just FYI. So after the Sultan, there comes these four major chiefs. And then there's the 8 chiefs and then the 16 chiefs. It's a complicated system. I don't have time for all that stuff, and you probably don't really care. So basically, there are two main things in their government. There's the state legislative assembly that Mazlan was a part of, and then the state executive council. And the Mentiri Bazaar that Mazlan wanted to be is the guy that gets appointed by the Sultan to preside over the executive council. Anyways, in July of 1993, he disappeared. He failed to show up to a couple of UMNO functions, and he was reported missing. Now, concerning was the fact that on July 2nd of 1993, he withdrew 300,000 ringgit from his bank, which is about $70,000 US. Now, in the country of Malaysia, it's mostly Islamic faith, and they follow the Quran for the most part. So the belief in the supernatural, though, like spirits and demons and the like, is pretty strong. So witch doctors and spiritual mediums, faith healers are all kind of all over the place there. Now, a belief in ghosts and demons is actually strong there, despite the fact that Islam forbids Muslims from having anything to do with such things. So shamans, which in Malay are known as Dukun or Bamo, are said to be able to make use of spirits and demons for either like benign or evil purposes. Now, there are reports of school classes that have actually been disrupted because of suspected cases of like possessed students. It's quite regular to have that happen. Haruspasi, which is searching for omens in the entrails of animals to predict the future, has actually been practiced there. And patients are sometimes treated with like this body smoking ritual, which the Bamo calls on like these friendly spirits to remove the source of whatever your illness is. They also employ a wide range of potions, herbal medicines, that kind of thing. Now, there's a belief in a thing called the Potanayak. Potanayak, and it's probably the most creepy. So it's this ghost of a stillborn female. It's like a type of vampire in Malay folklore. So according to the legend, Pontianak is either the restless spirit of a dead pregnant woman or the vengeful spirit of a woman that had been murdered by her lover. Now, the former version generally does very little harm to people except probably scaring the heebie-jeebies out of you. So she would probably be found standing by the side of a road, cradling like her tombstone like a baby and asking for a ride to like where her graveyard is. Now, the latter is a lot more violent, known as they kind of go known to go on like a bloodlust until she either kills her lover or the male ancestor of her lover. It's the classic Pontianak would have like very long flowing hair down to her hips, usually covering over her face, full white dress, sometimes with bloodstains on it, long fangs and long fingernails. And when she's near you, you'll smell this really flowery smell. I mean, if you picture the girl from The Ring, that's probably what she looks like. Now, to prevent a stillborn baby from ever becoming one of these Pontiac, you have to place a needle in each of her hands. Now, this is the dead woman's hands, and then a hen's egg under each of her armpits. Apparently, it works. Now, the Panaglion is this flying head with its disembodied stomach sac hanging below it. Now this is another type of female vampire that's attracted to the blood of newborn infants and uses these entrails that she's got trailing behind her to grasp her victims. Now, there's a lot of these kinds of stories, and they're all pretty gosh darn creepy. So if you are interested, you can just like literally just Google Malaysian folklore and you'll get a real eyeball full. Anyways, I bring all this up because it's not far-fetched that a politician in Malaysia would seek out the services of a witch doctor to pay them a lot of money. So taking $70,000 out of the bank and then disappearing kind of sparked a lot of theories that something dark and sinister had come calling for him, like he has sold his soul to something for political gain. But there were no actual leads, and it was starting to look like the case was headed to be like a cold case. Now, there are also rumors that Mazlan had disappeared of his own free will, so it wasn't really being investigated as hard as maybe it could have been. And the case likely would have gone cold, and Maslan would never have been found if it hadn't have been for drugs. It's because, for once, drugs saved the day. A 31-year-old man named Jeremy Hassan was brought into the police station on July 18th for basically being high as a kite and drunk as a skunk, as they say. And they brought him in to sober him up because he's wandering the streets causing a disturbance. Only in his drunken state, he figured he was there because of the murder of Mazlan. So he confessed to the whole thing. So Jeremy says that he was working as an assistant to a woman named Mona Fandey and her husband Mohammed Noor Afandi Abdul Rahman, who's always known as Afandi. And Mona was a witch doctor, a very high priced witch doctor. So Mona and Afandi had been called on by Mazlan to help him with his political career. And Mona told him that she was going to give him this talisman, which was essentially a cane, and like this ceremonial hat. That had apparently been owned by this Indonesian president. And after her rituals, and these handing him these items, he would be invisible. So all he had to do in exchange was to pay her 2.5 million ringgit, which is about $600,000 in US money. So Maslin took out what cash he could and then handed over 10 different land titles to them as like surety, and then made this appointment for this cleansing ritual that she was going to do at Mona's house, of course. Now, when Maslin got to the house, Mona, Afandi, and Jerami were there, and then Maslin was told to lie face up on the floor, and then Mona placed flowers all around him. And she told him to close his eyes and imagine money falling down on him. So while his eyes were closed, Jumanji grabbed an axe and then hacked his head clear off of his body. And then they dismembered him into 18 different pieces and then buried his body in parts of this hole that they had dug in this storeroom in her house. And then the next morning, Mona went out, bought herself a new Mercedes 280, booked a facelift, and Jeremy even directed them to the property where the Maslan's remains were eventually found. So, crazy story so far. Who is this Mona Fandey? Which I also ask. So let's explore her. So Mona was actually born Nur Mazna Binti Ismail on January 1st of 1956. So she loved to sing and dance and she wanted nothing more than to just be famous. So as a teenager, she had some pretty good success actually with this water ballet troupe. There isn't actually a lot known about her early life, but she had married. She had a daughter named Ms. Diana, and she was trying to launch this career as a pop singer when she met Mohammed Nora Fandey, Fandey, who was reportedly like her biggest fan. So he helped her with her career by funding it. She adopted this stage name, Mona Fandey, and then came out with this album called Diana One in 1987 to moderate success. It's kind of a one hit wonder kind of thing, um, which I'll see if I can find a little example of that little ditty that she's got.
Air mata mengenang ibu yang tiada, sedih hati tak terkira. Berilah daku harapan menghamburi masa depan. Dengarlah ratapan anakmu.
So Effendi managed to get her booked on a few TV appearances, but the song kind of faded from the spotlight and she wasn't able to produce another hit. So she became this witch doctor to the elite. And she had a pretty good career of that. I mean, she made a pretty nice living off of that. Actually, a really nice living off of that. She had some bank and she owned more than one house, and they were mansions, really. But Mona wanted more, she wanted to be bigger. So on July 20th, 1993, this trio was arrested for murder and then taken to Kuala Lumpur. And on July 23rd, they were able to extract the remains of Mazlan from underneath Mona's storeroom. It had actually been buried and then covered with concrete. Now, some parts were not found. They are believed to have been eaten by Mona and her minions. During the investigations, it's reported that they also found the remains of three unidentified siblings, almost in the exact same state that Maslin had been found in, and also the remains of 32-year-old Fatima Muhammad. But nothing further was ever said about that part, only that she's suspected of several other murders. But under Section 34 of the Penal Code in Malaysia, the sentence is death. So I guess they figured it didn't really matter to really report on those murders. Seems a bit sad, but what can you do? There is a bit of rumor and speculation around this case that might not even be true, that there were other remains found. On September 12th, 1994, the trial for the three of them started. All three of them pled not guilty. So Mona came to the Timorlo High Court every morning with her new fancy facelift that she'd got. She would smile for the camera. She wore designer outfits. She basically acted like she was at the Grammys. Um, and this trial was just a sensation for the media. And after all, Mona and Effendi they were considered an attractive couple with a lot of money in their 30s. And this smile that was just plastered all over Mona's face was just super, super creepy. So she created a lot of notoriety for herself, including an anti-death penalty movements that Amnesty International got involved in. But she was weird throughout all of it. Like at one point, she was asking if she could like sing for the judge, and told people that she came from royalty. She asked the guards for copies of all the papers every day, and thank them for putting in such nice stories and pictures of her. So the trial lasted for 65 days and heard evidence from 76 witnesses. And then after 70 minutes of deliberation, the jury found all three of them guilty, and so they were sentenced to hang. The judge then asked them if they had anything to say, and Mona said, "I'm happy and thank you all Malaysians." And then she smiled this creepy, wide, super creepy smile. On February 9th, 1995, they were given their sentence of death by hanging, and between then and October of 1997, they filed appeals. Now, all of the appeals were denied. Amnesty International, who did appeal to the head of the state with a letter that read in part, Mona Fandey, her husband Mohammed Afandi Abdul Rahman, and Jamari Hassan face imminent execution after their final appeal for clemency has been rejected. On April 4th, the Pardons Board in the state of Pahang rejected Mona Fandey, Mohammed Afandi Abdul Rahman, and Jamani Hassan's appeals for clemency. This was their last opportunity to appeal against their death sentences. The death penalty is mandatory in Malaysia for murder, certain firearms offenses, and trafficking in a number of specified drugs. Amnesty International is aware of at least 353 executions by hanging since 1970. Amnesty International opposes the death penalty in all cases as the violation of the right to life and the right to not be subjected to cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment as proclaimed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The death penalty is inherently unjust and arbitrary punishment, however heinous the crimes for which it is provided. Please send faxes, emails, airmail, letters in English or your own language. Respectfully asking the King to urge the Pahang Pardons Board to reconsider their decision and commute the death sentences passed, expressing concern that Mona Fandey has reportedly claimed that she was tortured following her arrest in 1993 and asking whether any investigation was carried out in her allegations, expressing unconditional opposition to the death penalty as a violation of one of the most fundamental of human rights, the right to life, acknowledging the severity of the crime for which the three prisoners were convicted by emphasizing that there is no convincing evidence that the death penalty deters crime more effectively than other punishments. And that didn't work. So on November 1st, 2001, they were each given time with their families. They were each given a meal of KFC. And then on November 2nd, 2001 at 5:59 a.m., all three of them were hanged at the same time. And Mona's last words were, smiling that creepy smile, "I will never die." She was 45 and Effendi was 44. Now, a trial by jury was actually abolished in Malaysia in 1995, and the publicity of Mona's trial was cited as the reason for it. Publicity is said to taint juries, or to taint a jury pool and leads to biases. So in Malaysia, juries are only called on for specific crimes that carry a death sentence. So it consists, usually it's only 7 people there. And if you don't show up for jury duty, you could be jailed for 6 months. They also determined that juries were a no-go because the jury system costs too much money and time. Juries are not trained in legal matters and are inexperienced in the criminal justice system. Jurors may feel afraid to be responsible for sending a person to their death. The nature of the system is that it is compulsory, so some people may feel reluctant about participating, and some of the jurors may rush their verdict to leave earlier. Anywho, back to Mona. So in an interview with a prison officer who was Sergeant Azai, she said of Mona and the time that she was there in the prison, "I was on holiday at that time, but I have been earlier informed that Mona would be placed in the cell under my care in her last days. Her case was very much hyped about. I was terrified knowing I had to face Mona. I even asked for an utsaz to prepare some holy water." Mona's last cell was the first in the row, which meant she would be the first person I had to pass through. On my first day back at work after my holidays, I heard a voice giving a salam, a greeting. The minute I walked in, I knew it came from Mona, but I simply ignored her. Mona greeted me again the following days, but I still ignored her. On the 4th day, I finally responded, and Mona told me that she liked me the most among the other prison staff, and when asked her why, she said it was intuition. Never did it cross my mind that a simple salam would make me find a friend in Mona. She's a very friendly woman who speaks politely, never once spoke ill of anyone. There were many prison staff who badmouthed Mona, yet she remained patient and positive and never once retaliated. Mona loves sharing recipes with me. She said she likes putting padam leaves in her cooking because it would add a nice fragrance to the dishes. All I saw is a loving and sincere woman. End quote. But rumors from other prison staff weren't exactly quite as lovely about her. It said that Mona was able to somehow transport herself out of her cell at night and muttered spells under her breath. She could also manage to get out of her handcuffs and had been assigned 3 different guards to watch her at different times because of her behavior, or the willies that she was given to people. And after her execution, it was rumored that she still roamed the prison where she had lived, and also the house that she lived in. It was called, or the airplane bungalow. It's considered extremely haunted, and even paranormal investigators don't go anywhere near it. The legend is that you can't take to death your possessions, but the black magic is still there. So there are actually 2 locations that she lived in and owned, and both are considered to be the places of nightmares now. There was a neighbor of the airplane bungalow that was interviewed. Now, her English is hard to understand, though, so I'm not sure what she's trying to convey, but it sounds like there's something about a tree growing there that does something. The whole thing sounds really creepy. It's probably more creepy since it's hard to interpret what she's saying about this tree. But if you look at the images of the airplane bungalow, you know that it's not a place that you would want to spend the night. Bodies have continued to show up butchered similarly to Mazlan, making some people believe that her testimony at the end that she can never die is probably the truth. During the COVID pandemic, Malaysians started to tweet about Mona as being a hero, actually, and one saying, "You know, people are getting so tired of politicians when Mona Fandey begins trending out of nowhere." And then a Dr. Siu tweeted that, "I guess one wishes that Mona Fandey would be resurrected today to take matters into her own hands." Ali Rahman, who was a anthropologist from Malaysia, told Vice that Mona is seen as charismatic and fashionable female celebrity, a witch doctor who stood out in an overly religious, male-dominated field. Her services appealed to ambitious politicians looking for more power and success. While there was public outrage and disgust over what she did, a lot of people also thought it was the fault of such politicians for seeking black magic favors from Fandey and her team. So folklore around Mona remains that she is a bit of this pentacle, which is a form of vampire that comes from the word tangle, meaning to remove or take off. So she's like a floating head with these trailing organs still attached. From a distance, she's said to sort of sparkle like this ball of flames. A pentacle is like a witch that has developed this ability to fly from meditation by bathing in a vat of vinegar. The creature is, for all intents and purposes, a living human being during the daytime, and then anytime it wants to just detach itself from its body, it can do that. And a pentacle will often hunt at night for the blood of menstruating women. In folklore, there are women that do practice a lot of black magic, and they can only form this pentacle form at night, and this vinegar is used to shrink the organs. So she smells like vinegar when she flies around. The pentacle was once a woman. She used the magic arts of a demon whom she trusted by devoting herself to his service day and night for an agreed term, after which she was able to fly. That is to say, her head and neck could fly when loosened from her body, with the viscera depending from them, while the body remained behind. Wherever the person whom she wished to injure might live, thither flew her head, and bowels sucked his blood. So there's that for you to think about tonight. And that was the crazy murder of Mazlan Idris and this legend of Mona Fandey. And I'm going to be back again with another case. As always, thank you so much for watching.